Hey everyone, my name is Rahat. I hope you all are doing well. I am the host of the video series Mainframe Voices. As the name suggests, we are creating a video series where we gather different perspectives of experts on mainframe technology and mainframe modernization. Our goal is to highlight the importance and future of mainframe in today's technology landscape. In this episode of Mainframe Voices, we explore the impact of initiatives like Zowe and Galasa on the evolution of mainframe technology. These initiatives are the forefront of modernization mainframes, providing the tools and frameworks needed to bridge the gap between traditional systems and modern development practices. Our experts will examine how Zoe and Galasa are driving innovation, enhancing accessibility, and shaping the future of mainframes in a rapidly changing technological landscape. Let's delve into the significant role these initiatives play in advancing mainframe environments.
You touched on it earlier. The mainframe is about 60 years old, 65 years old. I don't know how old it is. It's quite old anyway. A lot of the interfaces, the way that you interact with it, perhaps they grew up in the 1980s or the 1990s. And since then, lots of more new tools have come out, like Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ or scripting languages like, I don't know, like Python and things like that. Even Linux, even shell script, have all come since. So people coming out of college, people coming out of university now, that new generation. When I grew up, people still had punch card machines, right? I never learned on a punch card machine. I wasn't going to, but I didn't have a PC at home. They were very, very expensive. Now almost everybody has a laptop at home, and you can buy. People are taught computer science. When I was at university, it didn't even exist as a degree. Now there are so many IT graduates. So what we wanted to do with the Zoe project is make it so this generation of people coming in, familiar with Visual Studio Code, familiar with debuggers and right mouse clicking and dragging and drop, all those things we take for granted. When they see a mainframe, they can use those tools. They can use those familiar tools. They don't have to learn technology from the 1980s because there's a big problem with the mainframe customers, which is they have a skills issue, which is if you go into visit a customer and go walk into a mainframe shop, you'll find that almost everybody there is probably in their 50s or above, or they used to be like 10 years ago. So we need to get more people welcoming that world. And that's really the mission behind Zoe and Galasa as well, to try and get more modern DevOps tools so that people can be more agile. I mean, being agile software is basically releasing lots of software, releasing software often. It's what's called fail fast, fail often. So rather than having huge releases where you release software every 18 months, right, or a year, release software as often as you can. And to do that, you need reliable, repeatable testing, and you need what's called DevOps, where you combine development with operation. Galasa helps.
I guess linking to my previous thoughts, it's open source driven initiatives to create a richer ecosystem of tools to develop and test applications for the mainframe, and more important, these tools that any one of us can contribute and change and extend. And that's something that wasn't possible a couple of years ago because, again, mainframe tools were pretty much proprietary and under enterprise control. I think the more of these projects come up, and there's still a lot to be done, and there's already quite a few companies like, for example, Red Hat and others that have contributed with solutions to run on top of mainframes, things like integration, containerization. So there's loads of companies like the company I work for, Red Hat and others, that have built a series of different tools for mainframes to bring not only development and testing, but also things like containerization, like AI capabilities, runtimes, integration services for the cloud, and data sharing and data virtualization, and a bunch of all different things. And this is a consequence of making the mainframe more accessible to open source projects and companies working with supporting open source from an enterprise perspective that is really driving this innovation. Richer the ecosystem, the more developers and technical folks, but also business will see value in using the mainframe.
Yeah, I think they're critical. Start with Zoe. It's close to becoming a given that if you're running a mainframe, you're going to have Zowe. It's still, there's still shops out there that don't have it, but that is going to change quickly. For example, what I'm seeing is that Zowe is becoming a prerequisite for some things like the DB2 Administration Foundation. And what that is it's the admin interface to DB2, like Data Studio used to be. But Data Studio is no longer supported by IBM in DB2 version 13. So when you get to version 13, you have to be using Administration Foundation. And if you're using Administration Foundation, you have to be using Zowe. What I see probably happening here is that Zowe becomes part of the installation package for ZOS. It's not there yet, but at some point, somewhere down the line, maybe version 4 or maybe one of the 3 dots, you're going to start seeing Zowe included as part of this installation. You install ZOS, you get Zowe. If they don't do that, it's going to make it difficult for organizations to adopt the technology that IBM is building on top of Zowe. So it means, all right, here's Administration Foundation, which IBM introduced a couple years ago. A lot of shops don't have it because they see, oh, I have to install Zowe, and there's these other prerequisites, and I don't have the time to really dig in and get all this stuff installed just to install this one thing. That's changing as they get to version 13 because they have to do it. Have to is one way, that's the stick. The carrot, the other way should be it's part of the install and it comes along with it. And you mentioned Galasa. And yeah, that's kind of a newer offering. And just being able to test applications across multiple platforms, which is what that's kind of built for. I mean, testing's always a difficult process if you do it correctly. And it's especially difficult if you're running across multiple platforms. And there are a lot of mainframe applications that don't just run on the mainframe. It's like they have a component that runs on a Windows platform, components that runs on Linux or AIX, and all these things have to integrate together to deliver service to the end user. And with something like a testing solution like Galasa that can scale your testing regardless of platform, it becomes a lot easier. So the 2 examples you give here are going to be, I think, key components of the Z platform moving forward. And really, I think the sky is the limit for additional open source things that can plug in and help.
Most familiar with Zowe, and I must say, as a 20-30 year mainframer, experience in the industry, and Misty Decker, who we both know, was instrumental in this. There was a thing that IBM put on, some training that IBM put on for high school students and college students quite a few years ago, called the Master the Mainframe competition, and that's become IBM Z Explore, and Z Explore is phenomenal, really, really excellent training, and that's from someone who's a CEO of a massive mainframe training company. So what IBM does with Z Explore is phenomenal, really good training. But the Master of the Mainframe competition was the sort of the precursor for that. And Misty invited me to help with some stuff on the Master of the Mainframe competition, just speaking to students and so forth. And she got me to download, to install Zowe and VS Code on my computer. And I'm a traditional old ISPF green screen mainframer. And I logged in to Zowe and I'm like, this is so cool. This is so cool. So just on a personal level, as an old man, as an old mainframer, once I logged into Zowe, I was hooked. I'm like, this is fantastic. So I had great fun getting through the first level of Master of the Mainframe and playing around with Zowe and so forth. So when I was aware of the Open Mainframe project, it was going on a lot longer than what I was aware of. I got our company to develop a course on Zowe, and we offer it free to the world to let people learn more about Zowe and become more proficient with it. I think Zowe, it opened up my eyes. I think high school students and college students and anybody else, people in the industry, will start playing around. It's so many cool functions. It's so much easier to do things through Zowe than other ways, traditional ways. I can see the GSE UK conference last November. There was a talk, Joe Winchester, who's part of the Open Mainframe project, phenomenal guy. he was giving a talk on the adoption of Zowe and how widely it's being used. And it really is starting to escalate. There's so many people in the mainframe space using Zowe now. So anyway, I am rambling, but I'm a huge fan of Zowe, and that's on a personal level, and also what I'm seeing it do for the industry and how it's helping people and bring other people into the mix as well.
You know, I see it continuing to grow and be fostered, right? I mean, you know, collaboration is huge. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. All right. So you need to surround yourself with others. You need to see the perspectives of others. You need to learn from others, and open source is a great way to do that, right? A lot of people collaborating, all looking at the same code, looking at it from different perspectives, and bringing their perspectives to the table within that. Zowe, you know, Zowe is just it's the next phase, if you will, right, in mainframe tooling, if you will. So, you know, yes, for years, and it gets a bad rap, the green screens, they're still around. People still use them. I use it on a daily basis. You know, 3270 emulators and that type of thing. But now we're moving into more of a, you know, Windows-based interface, if you will, through Zowe. The ability to do things on a mainframe from other platforms, right? Outside of the green screens or the 3270 emulators. And so I see that continuing, right? I do see it continuing, because each generation, right, has something that they're comfortable with. You know, when I was a kid and you wanted news, you read the newspaper. You picked up a piece of paper and you read the newspaper. Now, my children today and I no longer read a newspaper, right? We go online, we use our phones, and we get our news that way. Same thing with your generation when it comes to tools and how you're going to want to work with this platform. It doesn't matter how you work with it. It's just the fact that you're continuing to work with it. That's what's so important. And that's part of that whole evolution that will just keep going and going. And Zowe, you know, Zowe is instrumental in that, in providing that next generation of mainframers with tools that they expect, that they're comfortable with, that they've grown up with, if you will. And then the same thing with Galasa, right? So, you know, the ability to do automated testing. When I first started coding way too many years ago, probably before you were born, no offense, we had to do it manually. You know, there was no automated testing. You know, you sat there and you punched a key and you pretended like you were the end user and tried to figure out what those end users were going to do and how they were going to break your code. Now you just run a piece of automation and boom, 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 it's done. You know, it ups your productivity, right, and all of those things. And so again, it's what the next generation comes to expect. And why shouldn't they have what they come to expect?
In my experience, or at least from the feedback that I've heard, or from the users that I've talked to before, how Zowe Explorer helped them is that made them understand mainframe easier. Because it's like eating something in the restaurant. You eat with your eyes, right? It tastes more if it looks good. So with new generation of engineers, when they see the terminal, they are really like, oh no, I don't want to see that. I don't want to do terminals and I don't want to do that. So now with VS Code, with CLI, it's way more familiar. And for a young engineer, it's not like overwhelming, because it's very overwhelming to try out the 3270. I was panicking for almost like a month because I didn't know how to go to one tab to another, you know, or I did something, I touched something and there's a bend in the job and I didn't understand what's happening. But now when you're using VS Code, when you're using CLI, the adoption of new engineers to mainframe is much easier because there's already familiarity with the tools. Like, let's say 25% of it is already done. And what you're going to go through is like understanding the mainframe itself. And you can do it much easier compared to start with 3270 first. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use 3270, but you can start with VS Code first, and then you can start 3270, just so you know how to use it as well. And I think that's how Zowe actually helps with the new engineers today.
I think you're exactly right. So the things that they learn in college and the things that they learn, like people from a college age or in their 20s, perhaps learn going to work at a startup or a company that uses explicitly Java or C. I think being able to bring those skills in and understand that they're valuable, as well as understanding the RACF and the inners of ZOS, I think bringing those two together and saying there's a compromise we can meet in the middle on, which is what Zowe does very well, is saying, you know, we work on VS Code, we are API enabling, we're ensuring that the experience is the same, whether you're from college, whether you're more experienced in the mainframe, or whether you're somewhere in the middle. I think the experience of bringing those two together is what is going to help with this. I think also it's really hard when you're at college to know what you want to do. I don't think anyone really talks to you or talks to college students about the fact that you can, you know, you've got 30 or 40 years of a career and you don't have to spend your whole time in one thing. And I think the more that we can bring other elements like Ansible or OpenTelemetry onto the platform, the more that we can encourage other people throughout their career to say, oh, well, actually, I'll go and do a job on the mainframe for 5 years because I would really enjoy that. I think at the moment that fluidity doesn't happen, but bringing more open tools onto the platform in a sensitive way that makes sense allows a bit more freedom of movement, what is a very difficult skills area to learn. And so it's a halfway house, I think. It brings some balance to the platform, which is necessary and needed, I think.
I love it. I personally use Visual Studio Code every day in my job, looking at code, developing code, compiling and then pumping it up to the mainframe. The different plugins that different organizations and companies have developed for Visual Studio Code that use things like Zowe under the covers, they only serve to promote and to make life easier for the modern mainframe user. I remember just seeing ISPF for the first time thinking, how do I use this? But after many years of using it, it's become natural, and there are so many things on the ISPF editor are absolutely brilliant in doing what they do that you can't get anywhere else. But there is also you have to also understand that if you're trying to engage newer people, a newer audience to the mainframe, then you're going to have to adapt and adopt new strategies. So a lot of developers coming from college, universities, they use something like Visual Studio Code and they want to be able to develop on VS Code. And so BMC's plugins for DevX experience, Broadcom's plugins for Endeavor, and their brilliant high-level assembler and JCL plugins for Visual Studio Code, Zowe interfaces. They're just making life so much easier for people who want to get involved in mainframe development. IBM and Rocket have developed the DB2 Connect and the DB2 Developer extension, which allows you to query objects and to build SQL. I mean, I can't remember the syntax of a merge statement or a create procedure statement in DB2, but if I go into Visual Studio Code and just start typing away create procedure, it automatically fills the screen with a prompt with everything that I need to know, and it just makes life so much easier. So Zowe is a brilliant introduction to the mainframe and helps integrate new developers with older, more seasoned sysprogs and developers who use ISPF. So they're all working on the same product, on the same platform, just in whichever way is comfortable with them. You don't have to have a complete different mind shift and understand something completely new.
Already mentioned that Zowe is an open source framework that facilitates the modern development and operational practices for mainframe systems. It's just like you can understand, you are easily connecting to a mainframe system with any of the platforms, whether it's be Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. And you just need an extension, you need Node.js, you need Java installed on your computer, and you're good to go. And then we have a common interface between different developers. So now if I am working on Zowe, anyone else would be there would be a other person who would be still using emulator for 3270. That would not work well. So we are trying to provide a common interface for developers, operators, administrators, enabling them to interact with mainframes in a similar fashion, which will be really convenient in the future. Zoe promotes integration with popular DevOps tools and practices, simplifying the development, deployment, and management of mainframe applications. I already discussed about the Zoe extensions which are available for VS Code as well as the IntelliJ. So as we already know, IntelliJ is specifically focused towards Java developers. So if someone is primarily working on Java programs, then they would be surely using IntelliJ plugin. But for rest of the people, the generic thing would be using the most popular VS Code extension known as the Zoe Explorer. Whereas the Galasa is an open source test automation framework designed specifically for validating mainframe applications. So now this is quite similar to what we did last year in the COBOL programming course. We have something known as COBOL checks. It's similar to that. It checks the code for errors and bugs, and it gives a result. That's the automation stuff going on. It supports the automated testing across various platforms, including the mainframes, and integrates with existing CI/CD pipelines. So why Galasa? It helps ensure the quality, reliability, and performance of mainframe applications by automating the test execution and providing a detailed insights into the test results. So if someone is not even aware of how to use a mainframe or how to analyze something on a mainframe themselves, they can use this open source test automation framework Galasa to exactly do all these things without knowing or having any technical skills and get the detailed insights about the systems. So both Zoe and Galasa contribute to the modernization of the mainframe environment by promoting agile development practices and automation and integration with cloud and hybrid cloud architectures. So these would be enabling the organizations to leverage their existing mainframe investments while adopting modern technologies and methodologies to meet evolving business needs. I would say obviously yes, because without GUI, we are all using GUIs in some or the other ways. Whichever device you talk about, even washing machines nowadays having a really good GUI. So without a graphical interface, it will not be easy for us to do because we have never learned in that way. I still remember in our generation we started with something like Windows XP, Windows 7, and then later I shifted to Mac OS. So all these things happened, but we never saw something. We were not in the Fortran age or COBOL age. So we were not those kind of people doing all these things. So we have this habit of seeing graphics quite a lot. It's not just initially the graphics were used just for movies and animations, but now it's everywhere. Whether it's be just a post or whether we talk about some our mobile phones, we have a lot of graphics going on there. So it makes it easier for anyone to do things which it increases the level of abstraction. We are hiding a lot of unnecessary things which people should not know. They should be doing what they are meant to do. So if earlier you have to write a lot of code and all to do certain things, now we have automation. But if someone is not knowing how to write a YAML script and all and do automation, create CI/CD pipelines, then they can actually use the GUI to do the similar kind of things. It would be a manual thing, but still it's possible. In general, the goal of DevOps is to shorten the software development lifecycle and deliver the software releases more frequently. So why we are doing this? To get a good software which will enable the next generation of users. You talk about Python, we have Python ideally, we have PyCharm. So these are the things which people are using. People are not using any emulators anymore. So very few people are there.
Zoe, as an example, is an environment that you can connect your laptop with a mainframe on COS, and that you can receive an easy entry step and a good connection to the mainframe without using directly COS. You can develop on it, and you can code on the mainframe then, and that's something equal. You would have an SSH connection continuously to it, but you have got your development environment on your PC for doing that. Especially young talents are using that a lot, and with that you can receive a new audience and also young people for the Open Mainframe project.
Big believer in meeting people where they are. And so I think I had a little fun with green screens when I started. I mean, it was only 5 years ago, but the fun quickly faded for me because I'm like, all right, that was fun for a little bit, but I have work to do and I want to do this in a way that's efficient for me. So even for me, I mean, being able to work with the tooling that I was familiar with was incredibly helpful because in the mainframe space, you do need to learn a lot of mainframe specific things, but cutting down the delta with which you need to learn by making sure you have, you know, an IDE that you're familiar with or a testing infrastructure that you're familiar with. Any way we can break down those things that don't necessarily have to be mainframe specific is going to be incredibly helpful. So with Zowe, as you say, you can have a VS Code environment and that connects directly to the mainframe and you can, you know, test your code and do everything through that. And so that's, yeah, it's a big deal. And even in the past 5 years since I've been involved, I've seen a radical transformation in how people are interacting with the system.
Absolutely. So, I mean, firstly, to start with Zowe, I did actually, my only experience with Zowe is I did a course of theirs, one of their open courses. I can't remember the name of it now, unfortunately, but I did one of the Zowe courses. It's like an introduction to using Zowe. And what struck me was just how easy it was, you know, to get started and to start doing stuff with Zowe. So it's not something that I don't use Zowe, you know, on a regular basis. It was purely, I just wanted to introduce myself to it after I went to a conference. I listened to a presentation about Zowe. And I thought, you know, I want to see what it's about. So that's kind of the extent of my use of it. But just, yeah, as I say, what struck me was how easy it was, and understandable for someone that, you know, even though I work in the mainframe space, what I'll get onto is that I don't, you know, have a particularly deep knowledge of exactly what's going on under the covers in the mainframe and how it all works, you know, at a very low level, which I think Zowe is obviously really helping people to be able to complete tasks on the mainframe, but you don't necessarily need to have that deep technical knowledge. And I think it's really similar with Galasa. Obviously, my perspective on it is as one of the developers of it, but I think the role that Galasa plays is to help people obviously test on the mainframe, with it being an integration testing tool. You can test on the mainframe, you can test mainframe-based applications, but again, without necessarily knowing, you know, the low-level detail of, okay, well, how do I create a data stream in ZOS? You know, what Galasa does, it lets you write Java code. Obviously, you know, Java's a very commonly used language. You write the Java code that has all these different methods that says, for example, create this or do this on your terminal. So you need to know what you want to do, but you don't necessarily need to know how that's done. That's what Galasa does. You know, that's what it handles with its collection of what's called Galasa managers. So again, it's just really about trying to make this kind of testing accessible, not only to people that are, you know, very experienced experts in the mainframe industry, but also being able to bring in people like myself who are early professionals, or people that maybe have experience in other areas of technology, but now want to come into mainframe, which is very different. All those people can write software tests for mainframe applications using Galasa, is what our kind of mission is, really.
We'll still see. It's relatively new. I think it's a year or year and a half old project, more or less. So I think that there is a bright future ahead of it, but whether it will actually get to real production environments, we will know in a few years. It's the same with Zowe. Like Zowe is now 5 years, I think, or maybe 6 already. And we are still at the place where we are gradually getting into the production environments. Like, yes, 4 years ago, people were playing with it and learning it and using it for some cases, but actually having it deployed in production across the enterprise and using it for everyday production usage, that's still where we are getting at, kind of where this space lives. Zowe is specifically built on making this easier. It provides the extensions for VS Code that allows interacting with mainframe just like with another platform. It does the same for Explorer, for IntelliJ. That's probably for a generation that's like 5-10 years older than yours. Then there is the CLI. Again, it's a bit different group of people that's not really that visual, but like on the other hand, really likes to work in the command lines interfaces. And there are those regardless of age. And then obviously there is the virtual desktop that allows you to effectively and easily build applications and access them via web interface. What it does not do, and there was an effort, didn't really succeed back then, was providing also mobile interfaces for the same reasons. I think that the mainframe industry wasn't there yet at this stage. We probably need to revisit in a year or two.